She begged for absolution. She was only 23. But by then, no doctor would help. Only old prayers, rituals, and the promise of demons to chase. What darkness did she inherit, and who let it consume her? Germany, Bavaria, early 1950s. Anneliese Michel is born September 21st, 1952, into a devout Catholic family in Liebelfing. Her youth is steeped in ritual, Mass twice a week, prayers, communion, a trust in sacraments. Always there is a promise of salvation, of demons kept at bay through devotion. She is described as bright, obedient, serious. So ingrained is the fear of sin that even the smallest perceived offense demands atonement. But behind the veil of faith, a tremor. Around 16, seizures begin. Temporal lobe epilepsy, dazed blackouts, convulsions that no prayer seems to quiet. Seizures intensify. Anneliese is hospitalized intermittently. Doctors prescribe anticonvulsants, Dilantin among them, mood stabilizers. None succeed. Depression deepens. Hallucinations, visions of faces, voices that whisper guilt of damnation. At night, torment. She reports whispers of being damned, rotting in hell. Religious objects that once brought comfort now incite fear. Medication fails. The institution of medicine doesn't hold her up. It offers tests, pills, routines, but no absolution. And so the notion of possession, ancient, inevitable, creeps in. The family, desperate, turns increasingly to the church. The idea of demonic possession, once whispered, becomes louder. Prayers, blessings, small rituals. Local priests are approached, some refuse. Some warn, don't abandon medicine. In 1975, Father Ernst All comes to believe that Anneliese is more than ill. He perceives demonic presence. He petitions Bishop Joseph Stangl for permission to perform exorcism rites. The church investigates. Are the criteria met? The signs? The voices? The suffering? Permission is granted. The small exorcism under the old Roman ritual tradition. Thus begins the formal descent. September 24th, 1975. First ritual sessions begin. 1 or 2 per week. Each lasts hours. Holy water, prayers, chains, restraint. Dark voices, guttural growls. Screams echo. Light flickers. Anneliese cries out in tongues. Objects thrown. She flinches at crucifixes. Between rituals, her body weakens. She stops eating. Sleep becomes a torment. Medical treatment is abandoned by the family. Her internal world, already fractured, becomes a stage for demons. Anneliese claims more than one demon. Names: Lucifer, Judas, Nero. Sometimes Hitler, Cain, even a disgraced priest. Each voice claims its territory in her consciousness. Arguments, rivalries, monologues about sin, about suffering, hatred, the world's decay. They mock, they threaten, they force humiliation, force exposure, vomiting, self-harm. She rejects food, even water. Belief becomes punishment. Faith becomes filters through which horror is magnified. Her flesh thins, eyes hollow, bruises, contusions, sores appear. Ligaments strain, endless kneeling genuflections, 600 or more sometimes. Knees rupture. Walking becomes impossible without help. Her weight drops drastically. The body that housed her soul becomes a map of suffering. She is chained, held down during exorcisms. Her strength drains. Her voice, when she has it, is raw, anguished. Moments of lucidity, such as conversations with friends or her boyfriend, are slivers of a life slipping away. Her doctors have prescribed treatments for years, anticonvulsants, antipsychotics. But in the exorcism period, those interventions are gradually abandoned. Reports say she refused treatment, or the family refused to allow doctor involvement. Institutional oversight fails. Church permission seems to override medical necessity. Each exorcism becomes less about spiritual deliverance and more about ritual endurance. Ancient rites, prayers and Latin commands, sacred objects, all marshaled, but no nutritional support, no hydration. She is fading. In exorcism, space becomes a cage. Her house becomes stage and cell. Priest's family, a few chronic witnesses. Tapes record the sessions. Voices scream, sing, curse. Light cuts in through windows. Smell of holy water, sweat, vomit. The texture of desperation, of skin, of bone, of spirit. Inside those rooms, Anneliese sometimes reverts to being herself, a student. She recalls her faith, her hopes, the vision of teaching. Then the tides turn. She is again bound, unable to swallow, unable to rest. Her body convulses. Her voice breaks. Ancient trauma meets modern psychosis. Spring 1976. Anneliese is in a critical state. Pneumonia sets in. Fever. Her organs cry out. She is almost skeletal. By her last exorcism on June 30th, she is too weak to genuflect alone. Her parents help. The ritual is no longer only spiritual. It is anatomical. The body trembling in delirium. Sounds, whispering, sobbing, gasping. The line between illusion and reality fractures. She says to her mother, "I'm afraid." Her voice low, the fear palpable. On July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel dies. Cause, malnutrition and dehydration. Autopsy reveals fractures, infections, pneumonia. A body that carried hope and fear beyond its strength. The end is quiet. No more voices. No more ritual. The absence echoes. But the questions remain. Who allowed this? Who chose faith over medicine? Who believed demons when doctors could only speculate? Institutions, doctrine, individual guilt, all entwined. In 1978, two priests, Ernst Alt and Arnold Renz, and Anneliese's parents are charged with negligent homicide. The state argues that her death could have been prevented if medical care had not been abandoned. The defense argues they acted in sincere belief that possession justified the rites, that her suffering had a spiritual dimension. The church is involved, not only in exorcism but in legal defense. Institutional control intersecting with law, faith, tyranny of belief. Verdict: all are found guilty of negligent homicide. Sentences: 6-month imprisonment, suspended. 3 years probation. Fines: the parents are said to have suffered enough. No jail time effectively served from the exorcists or parents. After the trial, the Michels request exhumation. Rumors that Anneliese's body had not decayed. A Carmelite nun claims visions. The coffin replaced. Oak lined with tin. Her grave becomes a pilgrimage site. Among small groups of devout Catholics, she is venerated. Some believe she bore stigmata. Others see her as atonement for erring priests, for lost youth. Her suffering becomes myth. Her silence becomes spiritual speech. 42 of the exorcism sessions were recorded. The tapes are chilling. Voices overlap. Growls, curses, pleas. Occult dialogues. Demons arguing among themselves. Sometimes incoherent. Sometimes deeply human beneath the distortion. Fear, shame, hope. These recordings, intended for deliverance, become evidence. In court and in cultural memory. They force outsiders to confront both the vivid horror and the ethical abyss. Was it spiritual deliverance or torture masked as ritual? Look closer. Medical institutions, psychiatric authorities, the legal system, the church, all in orbit. Each had chance to intervene. Each passed. The church granted permission. The doctors were sidelined. The family believed. The priests acted. The legal system later condemned But too late. Diminished responsibility cited. Belief in the devil undermined capacity to reason. The law accept that belief, meaning doctrine helped excuse negligence. Institutional belief becomes martial law over one fragile life. Possession, an ancient myth. Rituals centuries old. The church's exorcism rite. Rituals that assume sin, demons, moral corruption. Anneliese's case forces us to ask, how many ancient fears lie dormant, ready to be invoked when suffering lacks explanation? When trauma, illness, and fear are all fused. Anneliese, sick, isolated, frightened by voices, by light, by holy symbols. She becomes mythic. The demons that claim her voice, the ancient rituals that bind her body, the silence of medicine. Together they become generational trauma given flesh. Modern psychiatric understanding. Temporal lobe epilepsy can produce hallucinations, auditory/visual distortions, altered states of consciousness. Bipolar disorder can plunge one into despair, mania, delusions. Treatment can help, but only if given timely with care. In Anneliese's case, prolonged medical treatment failed. But was the treatment enough? Was it continuous? Was there oversight? Or did faith become substitute for therapy? Did belief magnify symptoms until the body gave way? At what point does faith become cruelty? When ritual demands too much of flesh, when belief overrides bodily need. The parents. We saw signs of Christ in her hands, they say. But was that miracle or suffering misread as sanctity? Priests. Sworn to care for souls. But what of bodies? What is the responsibility of spiritual authority when a person is weakening, starving, and the church, the legal system, institutions that promise safety, truth, help, but also that enforce belief, that decide what is real, what is evil, what is treatment? The story haunts beyond Bavaria. Films inspired Requiem, 2006, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, 2005, among them. Audiences drawn to horror, yes, but also moral ambiguity. Commentators debate, was this possession or preventable tragedy? Mental health advocates see negligence. Believers see martyrdom. The case becomes touchstone for exorcism regulation, for conversation about psychiatry in the church, for law, policy, and human dignity. A voice in the dark. No ritual made her whole. No prayer saved her body. A life squeezed dry by demons, real or imagined, by fear, by faith, by abandonment. Anneliese Michel died at 23, not only of epilepsy, depression, hunger, but of a consensus that her agony was spiritual, not medical. That ancient rites could replace care. That belief, if uncontrolled, becomes its own kind of horror. In the end, her story stands as a warning. Institutions that claim authority, religious, medical, legal, must be held to truth. That beyond fear and myth, there lies responsibility. That hidden corruption is not always conspiracy. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's action unchallenged. And sometimes the darkest secret is not what is possessed, but what is permitted